When I started this film about the causes and solutions to the climate crisis, I had no idea that I'd be spending so much time looking at water.
Yes, it is water that governs 95% of the heat dynamics of the blue planet, Earth. Water.
Nor did I realize the beauty in a pile of shit.
That is the perfect poop. Right consistency, the right height, with a little dollop in the middle.
And of course we should add that this doesn't smell.
At all.
Right.
No, that's just really a gift from the cow to the ecosystem that has been providing her with nutrition. It's beautiful.
I had believed, like most of my friends and colleagues, the popular idea that the climate crisis was caused almost entirely by the rise in carbon emissions in the atmosphere due to our excessive burning of fossil fuels, and that the solution was renewable energy. I'd even made a film about it. I see now that I was only looking at one of many parts and one of many solutions to the complex climate crisis. I was eager to save the planet.
Save the planet? What? Are these fucking people kidding me? Save the planet? We don't even know how to take care of ourselves yet. We haven't learned how to care for one another. We're gonna save the fucking planet? I'm getting tired of that shit. The planet is fine. The people are fucked. Difference.
Of course he's right. It's not the planet that needs saving. It's us.
For this new insect destroyer contains a lot of DDT. Its DDT content is even higher than government specification. This diabolical weapon of modern science killed billions of insects. Man, with this newly discovered force, has at long last gained the upper hand in our age-old struggle.
We humans in the so-called civilized world have the insane habit of destroying the very thing that keeps us alive and healthy, the very thing that regulates our climate, the system of life. In other words, the activities of all the organisms on Earth. The good news is that there's a growing movement of people who are solving the climate crisis by regenerating life. They are actively working with nature to restore the forest, fields, wetlands, and oceans.
I mean, it's possible to regenerate every ecosystem, in my view.
To rebuild the soil.
If you want to solve the problem of climate change, you don't need any technology. You just take care of the soil.
To grow healthy food and to build healthy communities.
It's not a garden, it's a community garden, and that word community garden is very, very important.
It's in food we can bring justice, equality, and liberation for all.
It was exciting when I realized I had to go back to the basics and piece together a new understanding of climate change. Ecologist Stephen Harding pointed out that while people have been destroying nature for most of human history, things took a turn for the worse in the 17th century.
I mean, it's a very complicated, long story. I think the final rupture happened during the scientific revolution with our dear friend Descartes. He was the one who told us that we are fundamentally disconnected from nature. And he told us the whole universe is nothing more than a vast machine, soulless, dead, and therefore available for us to use as we wished for our own purposes.
This way of thinking allows human beings to look at nature as if they are outsiders. setting the stage for the exploitation of the land and the people. The scientific revolution also introduced a method of thinking called reductionism. The idea is that we can understand something by breaking it down into smaller and smaller parts. While reductionism is helpful, and it's used all the time, it can be very limiting. It is this way of thinking that increasingly narrowed down the multidimensional climate crisis to first the greenhouse effect, then to one part of the greenhouse effect, the greenhouse gases, then to just one of the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, and then to one of many sources of carbon dioxide, the burning of fossil fuels.
Scientists now believe that increased quantities of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are leading to a significant warming of our planet, possibly within the next few years.
Tragically, this narrative, because it includes only a part of the problem, is missing many solutions. Having just made a film about the radical scientist Lynn Margulis and her symbiotic worldview, I knew that there was another way of thinking, a holistic or ecological approach that takes into account that everything is interconnected and interdependent. In other words, everything causes everything else. The Gaia theory that Lynn Margulis developed with Jim Lovelock proposes that all of life on Earth is one big self-regulating and self-sustaining system. Despite modern society's drive to separate itself from nature, we all remain a part of nature.
We are part of a great big entity, Gaia, that is regulating our planet.
There's an active temperature regulating system, and when we look around, we see that it is really the sum of the organisms and their activities that have the potential for regulating the temperature.
Lynn Margulis also taught me that science is about asking questions and knowing that often the best answer is a better question. So, how do the activities of all the organisms on the planet regulate the temperature? My research began when I was introduced to an organization called Biodiversity for a Livable Climate.
We wanted to change the climate conversation to include the vast power of biology, which is widely misunderstood and underrated.
On their website, I found a treasure trove of scientific papers, articles, and videos. I read many authors who were exploring alternative, sometimes radical narratives about the environmental and climate crises. A book by Slovak engineer Michal Kravčík and his colleagues, Water for the Recovery of the Climate, A New Water Paradigm, became my indispensable guide. Then, a lecture by Australian scientist Walter Jena totally blew me away.
I'm really a soil microbiologist from down under. Most of my time I spend just quietly underground, just doing work there.
Walter travels and teaches extensively, and I was able to spend 2 weeks with him in the mountains of Vermont, learning how water cools the planet.
The climate of the planet is governed hydrologically. The vegetation of the planet are the tools, the instruments that help drive that. And of course, we humans then influence that vegetation. But the question is, how do we do it practically? And of course, the answer is very simple. You're standing on it. You're standing on your own power and agency. Because underneath us is soil. And if I go down and I basically pick up a handful of soil, that soil is a sponge. And that's a sponge that can actually infiltrate the rain, retain that water in that soil, make it available for plants to grow, and make it able to drive that hydrological cycle.
That's the story in a nutshell. But backtracking, the first question Walter and I explored was, how come our beautiful planet has a temperature within a range ideally suited for life? The conventional wisdom was that it was just luck, the Goldilocks principle.
That planet you live on is not like all the rest. You're blessed with just the right size, the right temperature, the right atmosphere, the right composition. Everything just right to produce the biggest miracle of all.
However, in the mid-1800s, Joseph Fourier, a physicist who studied heat, calculated that based on its distance from the sun, the Earth should be much colder.
Because if we were just a rock in the solar system, an inert rock, we would be 33 degrees centigrade cooler. We would be frozen. All the oceans would be frozen. There would be no life on land. We'd be a little bit like Mars, which is a frozen planet. But Earth is warmer because life on Earth developed a greenhouse effect, a greenhouse warming effect.
The greenhouse effect warms the planet because certain gases in the atmosphere, called greenhouse gases, let the incoming energy, sunlight, through. Then, as the land warms up, it re-radiates infrared heat upward. The greenhouse gases absorb some, but not all, of that re-radiated heat. Imagine a greenhouse gas molecule. It absorbs heat and then sends it back out in all directions. Because they send some of that heat back down to the Earth, collectively the greenhouse gas molecules warm the atmosphere.
And it's that re-radiated infrared heat which is absorbed by greenhouse gas molecules, largely water vapor, but also CO2, and that in a sense creates the natural greenhouse effect.
It came as a surprise to me when Walter explained that water vapor is the most abundant greenhouse gas in the atmosphere.
The water vapor greenhouse effect is about 80% of the gas effect compared to the CO2, which is about 11%. And about 9% is the methane and nitrous oxide, CFCs and others.
But then the real shocker came.
Irrespective of how many molecules in the air, the thing that determines a greenhouse effect is the amount of re-radiation coming from the Earth. Because we have bared this soil will heat up much, much more so than a soil protected with green vegetation that is still moist.
I want to measure the bare soil of this plowed field. So that's 133. All right.
This infrared thermometer measures the heat or infrared radiation coming off the surface.
So now I'm going to go over here to the grass. 88.
That's 45 degrees Fahrenheit difference between the bare soil and the grass-covered soil in the same sunlight.
And absolutely, the more we clear the land, physics dictates that it will have to re-radiate all that energy back, and that is a driver of the greenhouse effect, and that is what we have grossly disturbed. We have created 5 billion hectares of man-made desert and wasteland on this land surface of 14 billion hectares. 40% of the land area is now absorbing heat because it's bare, it's dry, and re-radiating massively. But by keeping surfaces cool and moist and at lower temperature, we can effectively turn the greenhouse effect from high down to simmer. We can do that within days, simply by keeping landscapes cool and moist.
Then Walter explained to me that the Earth has both warming and cooling processes.
Good morning. Here we are in Vermont. It's August, and we've got up very early before the sun's come out to look at these beautiful misty miasmas that are rising from the vegetation. As soon as there's light, the plants open their stomata. These are these little pores in their leaves, and basically then they start releasing water. Water that they've accumulated over the night from the soil, and the water vapor they release very quickly condenses and forms these misty haze microdroplets that we're seeing in the air.
These microdroplets are liquid water. When the sun comes out and warms the mist, these microdroplets evaporate into water vapor, which is a gas, so we don't see it.
And that water vapor again warms the atmosphere because it becomes a primary greenhouse gas. So there's this dual warming effect that has evolved, very much related to the level of water in the atmosphere. But of course, if that was the only process that was there, we would warm the planet, warm the planet, warm the planet. And that's exactly what's happened on Venus, because it's gone into a super greenhouse effect. And progressively it's got warmer. But on Earth, another process has evolved. And basically it's a process by which this water can be removed from the air. And nature does that exquisitely efficiently by producing clouds. And then those clouds reflect a lot of the incident solar radiation back out to space. And that cools the planet below.
Clouds, those massive bodies of water, have a tremendous effect on the Earth's climate, and it's hard to untangle the warming from the cooling. At any one time, more than half the Earth is covered in clouds. Most of us don't think very much about the atmosphere because, well, we don't see it. Go to any reputable source and you'll find pie charts that show that our atmosphere is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and the remaining 1% are trace gases. Of these, carbon dioxide represents about 4/100ths of 1%. But don't let that very small amount fool you. There's always enough carbon dioxide in the air to supply carbon atoms, the building blocks of life, to all the world's plants. The atmosphere is a very busy place. In addition to gases, the atmosphere is teeming with soot and dust, bacteria, fungal spores and viruses, and all kinds of chemicals produced by plants, animals, and other organisms. These are called aerosols, and as we'll soon learn, these tiny airborne particles play a tremendous role in the climate. When you smell the garlic coming from your friend's lunch, that means a garlic aerosol has traveled from his mouth to your nose.
Search regular and sugar-free for breath that's face-to-face fresh.
One day I found myself studying these pie charts and asked, "Where's water vapor?" That's a gas. It turns out that water is just too variable to fit into pie charts. Water is the original shapeshifter. It exists in our daily lives as solid, liquid, and gas. All three are in this shot, but you can't see the water vapor gas. The amount of water vapor in the atmosphere varies from less than 1% to about 4%. And if you include liquid water and ice, there's more water in the air than in all the world's rivers, 10 times more. And the amazing thing that gives water the ability to cool the planet is evaporation. When water evaporates from liquid to vapor, rising up in the air, it requires 590 calories of energy for each gram of water. The water vapor takes that heat energy upward, cooling the area below. Of course, a lot of this stuff is just common sense. We know that on a hot sunny day, it's good to go into the shade. And how great it feels when the rain comes to cool things off.
Come on with the rain, I've a smile on my face.
We each participate in the hydrological cycle every day and cool ourselves by sweating.
For that sweat to evaporate, again, needs 590 calories of heat energy, which cools your body down, your surface body down, that 590 calories.
Just add to that picture that plants sweat too. Plants cool the area around themselves by evaporating water off their leaves. It's called transpiration.
So what a plant's doing with its leaves, it's got little holes in its leaves. It opens them up to take in CO2. For every molecule of CO2 it takes in, it loses hundreds of molecules of water going the other way. That's water that's been sucked out of the ground, through the roots, up the trunk, and out the leaves. Now, every molecule of water, when it evaporates, is absorbing heat. So it's basically pumping heat out of the ground layer, the soil, and the vegetation, and then pumping it into water molecules that are carrying that heat. When that water vapor then gets high enough that it condenses and falls as rain, then it releases heat. But that's up higher.
What Tom Goreau is describing is called the small water cycle, in which water, sucked up from the soil, is transpired by trees and comes down as rain over the same environment. So this rain outside my studio may contain water that was recently evaporated from this very area, the Hudson Valley of New York State. It's a local water cycle. But what's even more astounding is that trees and other organisms release many of the aerosols, those tiny airborne particles that are necessary for mists and rain to exist in the first place.
The aerosols, these are actually organic molecules produced by the plant. They're often a lot of the fragrances and aromas and smells that we get from the plant, and they're actually acting as nuclei, micronuclei, to actually coalesce water vapor around them to make these haze microdroplets. To form clouds, nature has evolved another group of precipitation nuclei. And these are largely biological nuclei that coalesce about 1 million of these haze microdroplets to make a cloud droplet. So nature has actually balanced the hydrology, the heat dynamics of the atmosphere through these two balancing, opposing biological processes. The formation of the aerosol micronuclei, which create the hazes to warm the planet, and the formation of these larger hygroscopic precipitation nuclei that form the clouds and actually then later on form the rain.
And rain cools the earth. So not only do trees need rain, rain needs trees.
Water. That's what I'm getting at, water. Mandrake, water is the source of all life. 7/10 of this Earth's surface is water.
The oceans are a gigantic part of the biosphere and have a tremendous effect on the climate. This whale poop, captured by ABC News, supplies nutrients for phytoplankton, which produce aerosols that seed clouds and rain. So rain needs poop. The oceans contain 97% of the water on our planet. Of the remaining 3%, which is fresh water, 2% is in icebergs and glaciers, which leaves only 1% for all of our freshwater needs. That's not a lot of fresh water to go around. Luckily, there are natural processes that bring fresh water to the land. One such process that I knew nothing about is called the biotic pump.
The biotic pump is a mechanism by which large forests can transport atmospheric moisture inland. And we have rains and we have rivers and life thrives on land. If we destroy forests, then we don't have this flow, and the flow can be reversed and the land becomes a desert.
Theoretical physicist Anastasia Makareva developed this important idea with her colleague, the late Viktor Gorshchov. As water is pulled from the soil, travels up trees, is transpired through leaves into the air above the forest, and then condenses into mists and clouds, it creates a low pressure zone in its wake, and that literally sucks humid air in from the ocean. A series of such biotic pump cycles can transport water inland for thousands of miles. Eventually, much of this water joins the large water cycle as it travels through streams and rivers back to the oceans. The large water cycle is another way fresh water is brought to the land. As water evaporates off the oceans, forms clouds, and then travels inland, it dumps that fresh water onto the land.
Has evacuated. If they're still here, they better have a safe place to be.
When we see these big storms, that's the system
trying to cool.
Yeah.
And
it does. It works.
The people, there's been arguments about whether the amount of water that came up and landed on Texas and Louisiana during Harvey, was it 30 trillion gallons or was it 33 trillion gallons? And so it's some big number in the trillions. And 30 trillion gallons, when it condenses, releases the energy of thousands of Mount St. Helens events. This is a huge amount of energy trying to get away. And I always thought it was converted into wind, but it turns out like maybe 1% of it is turned into wind. The rest of it is energy trying to radiate away, trying to get this extra energy out into space. So these storms are getting bigger and bigger.
That's one of those big ironies I ran up against. Hurricanes cool the planet.
So we're going to see bigger storms as long as the oceans keep holding the heat. The problem is it's going to take a while.
Believe it or not, there's an opportunity here.
The opportunity is the oceans are warmer now. They're putting up more moisture. There's going to be huge storms. There's going to be more rain. Let's keep the rain on the continents as fresh water longer and use it to grow things, and then maybe we'll have a chance. And I'm afraid our engineering plan oftentimes is to send all that good fresh water back to the ocean too fast. We got into this thing in America where we thought, let's run all the water down to the dams and then we'll irrigate. But when the water comes down, we have to hold it. The Beaver plan was to hold the water on the continent as long as possible, keep that fresh water upstream.
Beavers are nature's supreme hydrological engineers.
We had tens of millions of beaver making ponds everywhere. They trapped out the beaver before the biologists could even study the process. And that's when the land started to desiccate.
Climate change is upon us. It's actually impacting now. It's intensifying now, particularly in these hydrological or water-related processes. Hurricanes, floods, storms, droughts, the whole aridification of vast regions, and with aridification, wildfires. And so we've got to step back behind that to say, well, why these extremes? And what we've in a sense lost, critically lost, is the actual buffering and regulation that used to exist in the climate. Okay, so what buffered and regulated these extremes and gave us predictability?
One piece is that idea of the soil sponge being the basic infrastructure for life, and it's because of its structure and function.
If you look closely at soil, it consists of lots of little particles, and between them, lots of air spaces. Each little bit of dirt is enclosed in a sticky substance called glomalin, which is a protein produced by fungi. When the rain comes, the water is held in this soil carbon sponge.
So it's filtering the water, it's absorbing rain, it's reducing flooding, it's reducing drought.
We've had extreme floods in the Midwest this year.
Yes.
Tell us about those.
We've had extreme flood because we've had this extreme variation in rainfall. But on top of that, and compounding that, is we have effectively concreted our catchments. We have hardened, destroyed the soil structures in those catchments, and so those soils now are able to hold perhaps 20% of the water that they did 100 years ago.
So this will bring up a winter wheat crop, but you can see here how powdery the soil is. There is absolutely zero biology in this, and it's very difficult, to even hold it in your hands.
When I visited Andhra Pradesh, India, I was shown a comparison between living soil that holds water
Humus is forming. You can feel it.
It's very moist, beautiful.
Yes.
and dead soil.
If you observe here, this is the white layer. What are the chemicals? Nitrogen, DAP, urea, phosphorus, potash. Ammonium phosphate. Yes. Ammonia. We have a single super phosphate. Even if you pour the water, it will not infiltrate into the soil because it has formed a layer, chemical layer, which acts as a cement. So it will not infiltrate.
Because all the water that should have been in those in-soil reservoirs has rushed off in a flood peak, and we're almost by dictate back to drought. As we aridify our climates, by design, we create the probability of fires under dry periods. Fires need fuel, and it can only burn when it's dry. If the soil is wet, the grassland is wet, green, it doesn't burn.
I was introduced to Linda Gibbs, who watched her house in Malibu burn on television news during the Woolsey Fire on November 8, 2018. Then, a few days later, her son managed to visit the ruins.
Major's house, Brennan's house, the other house. Active fire from stoves, from gas lines. The fucking studio. Are you kidding me?
Their studio was spared because it was surrounded by Linda's well-nurtured garden with soil that held the water.
Keeping the sponge, we retain more water in the soil. We have more water for trees to take up to stay moist for longer so they're not vulnerable to fire. But also we provide more water for the fungi that exist in these forests that are the natural agent for breaking down dead fuel.
Fires aren't just the result of global warming, they are a significant cause of the problem. Remember in Vermont, we saw those beautiful humid hazes that warm the air? Here's an ugly version.
Every year we burn 400 million hectares of forest and over 2 billion hectares of grassland, and those fires are putting up carbon particulates into the air, and they serve as aerosols. Every year we burn 8 billion tons of fossil fuels in our industrial ecology, so the aerosol load that we have put into the atmosphere is immense, and of course the humid haze that results from that immense. From Cairo to Beijing, we now have the Asian toxic brown haze that's basically persisting, aridifying the country underneath and causing people immense health problems, emphysema and other crises.
To reduce these hazes, the burning of forests, crop residues, waste, and in particular fossil fuels must be reduced. So as you watch this film and learn the many ecological solutions to the climate crisis, don't for a moment think that excessive burning of fossil fuels isn't a big part of the problem. To confuse myself even further about water, I talked with Gerald Pollack, who explores water at the molecular level and has identified what he calls a fourth phase of water.
The water gets transformed from the ordinary H2O molecules into something that's actually ordered. And that's what we call fourth phase.
We see this fourth phase as the surface of this pond, or the shell of these drops. The fourth phase is a lattice of H3O2 molecules which have excluded the hydrogen ions. My conversation with Gerald Pollack got me thinking about how little we know about water.
Scientists have had a proclivity to stay away from the subject of water. And the reason is that there have been some scientific debacles that have taken place over the past 50 or so, 60 years that have been most embarrassing to famous scientists. Two of them practically lost their careers.
So Gerald Pollack knows he is heading into dangerous water. But he knows too that despite the tremendous pressure to conform in science, the only real scientific breakthroughs come when one breaks through peer pressure.
Once you realize that the water can have an ordered state and a disordered state, and with vastly different physical properties, so many things become possible, because if you never consider it, you may miss a critical point. I see bankrupt ideas that people just cling to because it's the tradition to cling to them. Very few scientists are, shall we say, crazy enough to challenge the establishment point of view. And when you don't challenge the establishment point of view, you don't get revolutions, and we need them. How come the cloud stays up? Right?
Right.
You never thought about that.
So this is blowing my mind a little bit, but that's good.
Only a little bit. That's not good.
So how come the Earth has a temperature beautifully suited for life? It's because life, the vast biodiversity that exists on the planet, cycles shape-shifting and energy-transporting water through the soil and trees, through the atmosphere, and back again, warming and cooling, creating its own moist, temperature-controlled space. Earth wouldn't have a temperature suited for life if it didn't have life cycling water.
The water and living landscapes narrative, the soil health narrative, is invaluable. So being able to build a movement that is bipartisan, in which people who are disagreeing about lots of other things can say, I want a landscape that helps my community and communities around the world have clean water, reduce flooding, be resilient to drought, have enough food, have fewer conflicts over land and water, have the beauty of diversity, diverse life, all of that. Who can disagree with that, right?
The challenge in climate change is to rebuild the buffering, is to rebuild the resilience and capacity of biosystems to sustain themselves.
It was Walter's challenge that got me thinking about the next question. How does life sustain itself?
Life is a process. It is the self-making process where components from the environment are taken in and moved around and changed chemically to do what? To make more. Why? To make more. Why? To make more. Life is always expanding, always making more of itself.
Life sustains itself by continuously remaking itself and all its parts. It does this by cycling through itself matter and energy. I think of this as my 67-year-old hand, but this is not the same skin I had a month ago, and the bones in my hand aren't the same ones I had, say, 10 years ago. Which is to say, my structure remains the same, while the energy and matter flow through me. So where do the energy and matter that flow through living systems come from? And where do they go?
Photosynthesis is this place where heaven and earth come together, right?
What life does is capture and accumulate solar energy. And the way it does that is through photosynthesis and recycling of the energy that's captured through photosynthesis. And that's the energy that fuels all the processes of life.
The energy that Junior gets from milk was in a contented cow 24 hours ago. And 24 hours before that, the same energy was in clover, which had absorbed it from sunlight that had come 93 million miles in 8 minutes from the surface of the sun.
It seems natural to think that the matter that makes up this field of barley and this tree comes from the soil. But no.
People look at trees and they think it comes out of the ground, that plants grow out of the ground. But if you ask where the substance comes from, you find out where do they come from. The trees come out of the air? They surely come out of the air. No, they come out of the air. The carbon dioxide in the air goes into the tree and it changes it, kicking out the oxygen and pushing the oxygen away from the carbon and leaving the carbon substances with water. Water comes out of the ground, you see. Only how did it get in there? It came out of the air, didn't it? It came down from the sky.
Water and carbon dioxide are the two miracle molecules. Plants take water and carbon dioxide and use energy from the sun to change them into sugars and oxygen. Glucose is a basic sugar that is used in this simplified equation. These sugars store solar energy and become food.
The plant makes itself first, and then through through the infrastructure of its own body, it sends those sugars down into the soil to feed other life. And then it also feeds life above ground through its own self.
Sometimes you hear people say that plants are a good solution to climate change because they draw down carbon and sequester it in the soil. At first, I was thrilled to hear this narrative, but then I began to notice that people thought this meant that plants take carbon dioxide gas out of the air and send it down to their roots, forgetting all about photosynthesis. And putting this together with the popular assumption that carbon dioxide is the bad guy, somebody came up with the ridiculous idea that to solve climate change, we need to build great big machines that suck carbon dioxide out of the air.
But here you see a full-scale direct air capture plant. You see it consists of 12 individual modules capturing the CO2 out of the air.
That's absurd.
The key piece is that soil carbon is life and the results of life. It's the living, the dead, and the very dead, someone said.
The very dead are fossil fuels, which brings me around to the second half of the carbon cycle, combustion. The trunks of these trees are made from the carbohydrate cellulose, which consists of thousands of glucose molecules. This tree stores a lot of energy. It is that energy which is warming me up this morning. The heat is released through the process of combustion. That smoke coming out of my chimney, sure, it contains aerosols, but it's mostly water and carbon dioxide, the constituents from which the log was made. The basic unbalanced equation for combustion, again using glucose as our simple sugar, is glucose plus oxygen, releases energy and delivers water and carbon dioxide. What's astounding is that this process, combustion, is happening in our bodies as we use the oxygen we inhale to burn our food and release energy, water, and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide gas that you or I exhale goes into the atmosphere and may one day be used by a plant to make a vegetable that ends up in a market in India. Everything cycles. The two equations, photosynthesis and combustion, are the opposites of one another. This cycle of life helps us conceptualize how carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are used and reused, while energy comes in and goes out. In order to walk, we use the energy that was stored in our food and then release it as heat from our bodies. That heat eventually makes it to outer space. Walter Jehne explained to me that the entire planet has an energy balance. When things are working, the same amount comes in as goes out.
Okay, we have a planet, we have a sun, and it's bringing in 342 watts per square meter of incident solar radiation on average continually into the Earth. And for the Earth to maintain a stable temperature, it's obviously got to re-radiate or transmit or reflect 342 watts going back out.
Okay, I know I really shouldn't confuse the issue, but one mind-boggling part of this story is that the energy coming in as sunlight is not the same as the energy going out as heat. The energy going out is less ordered. It has more entropy than the energy that came from the sun. And that order, which is left behind on Earth, is life. And this brings me back to the climate crisis. Because humans have destroyed so much life on Earth, so much cooling capacity, the planet isn't transmitting as much energy back out to space as it once did.
Instead of transmitting 342 watts per square metre, we are now transmitting 339 watts per square metre back to space and retaining an additional 3. And it's that additional 3 watts that is warming the climate dangerously. But keep it in proportion. It's less than 1% of the incident solar radiation, and nature had the tools to re-establish that natural heat balance and the global heat budget.
This deer and I stood looking at each other for a long time. The matter that makes up this deer comes from the plants it eats. Like us, the deer also needs mineral nutrients. It gets these from the plants as well. The plants got them from the soil microorganisms.
30% of the food manufactured by a plant is being exuded into the soil. And that is food for the soil microbes. The bacteria, the fungi, the nematodes, protozoa, arthropods, all the way up to the earthworms. And in exchange, they are providing the plant all the nutrients that a plant requires in a bioavailable form, whether it's nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, sulfur, boron. So this is coming to us through a biological route.
That's the kind of biology we want to see. Lots of worms, lots of worms. And as they consume nutrients, what comes out the other end in worm castings is actually more bioavailable to the plants. Phosphorus, for example, is 7 times more bioavailable to the plant after it's been through an earthworm.
Originally, these nutrients, except nitrogen, came from the weathering and breakdown of rocks. Nitrogen is essential for all organisms, but even though it makes up over 75% of the air, only certain bacteria can get it out of the air.
This is a red clover. It's a legume. And the legumes, they have a symbiosis with bacteria in their roots, which we're going to see now. And if you look here now, we take some out. See these little nodules on the roots? These little round things right here? That's the rhizobia bacteria. See these little round nodules? Oh yeah. So that's the rhizobia bacteria. They live in symbiosis with these legumes, and those bacteria can get nitrogen out of the air into the soil.
Once in the soil, nitrogen and the other essential elements enter living systems and are cycled and recycled. So when the deer poops, the nutrients are recycled back to the soil. Here's a beautiful moment I stumbled across in the woods. Fungal hyphae decomposing and extracting nutrients from a pile of deer poop.
You figure a cow is putting out 50 pounds of nutrients every day. A buffalo would put out maybe 100 pounds of nutrients every day. We had 60 million of them roaming around the West, and then we had 0. Why did the land start to die? We didn't have all that poop. Dung beetles would follow the herds. There'd be probably 1,000 dung beetles for every plop of buffalo. Dung beetles would bury all that stuff within days. Because they were rolling it into tiny balls, it was drying out, so the flies couldn't use it. And they would bury it 2 or 3 feet into the ground, and then the fungi go crazy, and the regrowth is just amazing.
Here's a time lapse of Pilobolus fungi spore capsules growing on a pile of horse poop.
Well, it's actually quite exquisite because see, trees can produce leaves without much loss to them whatsoever. I mean, that's no issue. But if they have insects eating the leaves and turning those leaves into dung, it's raining nutrients down onto the forest floor that accelerates the breakdown of the litter, helping to cycle the nutrients that would otherwise be locked up in the litter.
These leaves have been eaten by insects. And this is beneficial to the tree.
This is exquisitely essential to the ecology and health of this thing. The forest is almost intelligently farming insects to drive its own nutrient dynamics.
So the point is that the waste of one is the food of the other, and that's how the ecosystem goes around.
Yeah, nice and warm.
This is a pile of composted cow dung.
Put your hand here and you feel some real warmth. Oh yeah, you can feel some heat. Oh my God. Yeah. So what's going on in there? You know, bacteria stabilizing the material, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Yeah, it's a miracle, like from that clover field we saw, through the belly of a cow, through this, back out onto the land, and then it becomes a real virtuous cycle. And we really don't feed the crops ever, we always feed the soil. And then the soil allows the crops to thrive.
A sophisticated and ecologically sound use of animal dung and urine was zero-budget natural farming in Andhra Pradesh, India. These farmers are making balls out of dung, urine, pea flour, and sugar. My wife Sheila asked if they were worried about their hands. The farmers laughed and said it was good for their skin.
This one is jaggery, sugar.
Sugar.
And this one is pulse flour.
This is the pulse or pea flour that supplies nitrogen.
And most important is a handful of soil, uncontaminated soil.
The balls are allowed to dry and ferment, and then they are crushed and put on the fields. The seeds are also coated with a similar dung and urine mixture. As I was filming this, it suddenly occurred to me that birds and mammals naturally inoculate seeds. This is bear poop.
And then we put 3 inches of mulch.
These ecological farming practices are so effective that Vijay Kumar and his team have been able to grow crops in a drought year.
At the time of sowing, there are also no rainfall.
Time of sowing, there was no rainfall?
No rainfall.
What was the source of water? But then we discussed with Walter. We were very lucky to get in touch with him. And he was very excited. His analysis is the germination has happened because of the bioinoculum, the biostimulant. When it oxidizes, it is releasing water. It's not too much water, but it's enough to enable germination to happen. The microclimate created by the transpiration from the leaves, that cooling effect is actually collecting moisture in the air.
These farmers are solving the climate crisis and feeding their community using the natural processes of dung, urine, and soil. After Sheila and I said goodbye to the farmers, we went home and I began to study the soil around my studio in New York. I used to think that the mushroom was the whole organism. But the mushroom is the fruiting body, like an apple on a tree. The bulk of the fungi is underground. The fungi is a network of extremely small tubes called hyphae. Collectively, they form mycelium. It's hard to get your head around it, but this network of tubes is the organism. The fungal hyphae form a symbiosis with plants called mycorrhizae, and this symbiotic network provides water and nutrients to the plants.
They act as this incredible highway that shares nutrients and minerals and messages between the plants through that underground network. We're kind of obsessed with fungus. So in addition to the fungi that are coming out of the forest into our field, we are intentionally inoculating some edible mushroom spawn into the wood chip beds.
Here's a time lapse of mycelium growing. Healthy soil is teeming with life. In order to see this life, I visited my friend Ruben Duro in Barcelona and asked him to give me a tour of the critters in the soil, getting smaller and smaller as we go. Some you can see with the naked eye. The next level smaller requires an optical microscope. To look smaller still, Ruben used oil immersion microscope techniques.
Esta microbiota está formada por organismos como las bacterias, los nemátodos, los hongos, que resulta que son los organismos más abundantes del planeta.
Here are bacteria surrounding a tiny bit of soil. And then Ruben showed me bacteria colonizing fungal hyphae. Bacteria, along with fungi and other microbes, work together to decompose and recycle.
These communities are recycling everything.
Lynn Margulis is looking at colonies of bacteria.
You never throw anything out. It goes around. Garbage doesn't go out, like out. It goes around and around. Now these bacteria have solved that issue. People haven't solved it at all. People are in the growing stage and the ruining stage. People are ruining their environment. These bacteria are producing an environment that's livable. So I think we have lots to learn from them.
Soil has life, and soil is the source of life. You only need to take care of the soil. The soil takes care of your food, your trees, your houses, your clothes. If you want to solve the problem of climate change, you don't need any technology. You don't need anything else. You just take care of the soil.
These hills on the Pacific coast were once covered in forests and home to the Coast Miwok people. The trees were used to build San Francisco. This boreal forest, filmed by Greenpeace many years ago, was an essential part of the global climate control system.
We had forests over most of the land's surface, releasing water, forming these hydrological cycles and cooling. And it's these cycles that we've actually disturbed significantly through our land management. Whereas there were 8 billion hectares of primary forests, we've cleared 6.3 billion hectares of those.
So that's 78% of the Earth's original forests that we have destroyed.
Some has regenerated, as in New England, but we have fundamentally changed those hydrological dynamics of the planet. And that has contributed significantly to the changes in its temperature and its rainfall patterns.
In Britain, Stephen Harding introduced me to this 2,000-year-old yew tree.
It was probably planted here, but it's possible that it was part of the original forest. It's conceivable it was part of the original forest. And it's conceivable that it was considered to be a very sacred tree. Britain is one of the great deforestation headquarters on the planet. When I go on the train, between here and London, I find it very hard not to cry. When you think what was here before, it was mostly oak forest with meadows here and there, full of huge wild cattle called aurochs. There were wolves, there were bears, there were lynxes, there were beavers, there were eagles. The richness and diversity and sacredness of the forest that was here was just mind-blowing. And gradually, over thousands of years, that forest was cut down bit by bit. And every generation thought, oh, what we've got now is normal. It's called shifting baseline syndrome. Every generation degrades the environment a little bit, and they think it's normal. And the next generation degrades it a bit more, and then they think it's normal. And you end up with this kind of absolute disaster. And of course, we've exported this way of dealing with nature to the rest of the world, not just the British, but all the Northern Europeans who colonized different parts of the world have exported that sort of nature-hating mentality to the rest of the planet.
When I asked about the forests of India, a former British colony, of course, Vijay Kumar told a similar tale of exploitation.
More than 600 years ago, it was a very good forest.
Was that most of this area that we drove through to get here?
Yeah.
Was that mostly forest?
Yes, this was a very green area, plenty of water. Historically, they write about, a lot of elephants and a lot of wildlife in this area. So it is the gradual deforestation, the clearing of forests for crops, and commercial deforestation.
Was most of India forest at one time?
Whole world.
The whole world.
In Rome, I filmed this beautiful cedar tree, one of the legendary cedars of Lebanon. These trees were coveted for building ships. Rumor has it that Noah built his ark from cedars of Lebanon. Here's one of the last remaining groves of these cedars. Called the Cedars of God, it stands in Lebanon at this red dot. This vast area, including the Sahara Desert, was once green with savannas, woodlands, and forest ecosystems. There were rivers and lakes and wetlands.
Getting back to the Sahara.
Well, okay, the Sahara is a hard case because it was this exquisite savanna woodland up to about 7,000 years ago. We massively overgrazed it. massively aridified it, massively burnt it, so it flipped back to mineral desert. Life was extinguished. No water, no life.
It's hard to imagine the Sahara Desert being anything but a desert. Talk about shifting baseline syndrome. But prehistoric art does supply evidence that it was once a populated green area. Was this desert totally created by people's overuse of the land? Is this what California will look like? We often hear of large-scale efforts to plant trees in the desert. But a bunch of trees is not a forest ecosystem, and generally, most of these trees die.
It's estimated that in Niger, 60 million trees were planted from nurseries over a 20-year period with less than 20% survival rate.
There are ecological approaches to reforestation. One method was developed by Tony Rinaldo, who came in 1980 to the Niger Republic of West Africa to assist the farmers. He soon discovered that most of the farmland was desertified.
And we planted many species of trees, and we used the best techniques that were known. It was a total failure. The trees died.
And then Tony had a eureka moment.
But I was blind because I had not seen what was there all the time. It looks like desert, but there's trees everywhere. They're underground. And if we give it the opportunity, it will grow back very, very quickly.
It all starts with just simply pruning these apparent bushes that have been there all along. In terms of changing landscapes and reversing desertification and land degradation, this can be done on a large scale very, very quickly.
Tony Rinaldo and the communities he worked with showed that forests can be rebuilt from the life that is left, because life is constantly remaking itself. As I talked to people about repairing the damage humans have done to natural systems, the conversations inevitably turned to the power of biodiversity.
The more biodiverse an ecosystem is, the better it is at regulating the climate. And those ecological interactions between all the species give the whole ecosystem a very high level of resilience.
So it's really an issue of getting our boot off Mother Nature's throat and letting her actually regenerate. It's helping her restore these natural regenerative processes.
The basic principles are to maximize the recycling of water, energy, carbon, and nitrogen and the other trace elements plants need without letting it flush out of the system.
Tom Garreau and others have developed methods for restoring different types of ecosystems. He's even developed ways to regenerate coral reefs in the ocean.
In the ocean, every major ecosystem is in collapse. So if we don't regenerate the net effects of their metabolism, we're not going to be able to regulate Earth's climate at a safe level. I mean, it is possible to regenerate every ecosystem, in my view. What's needed, though, is pressure on our political and economic institutions to make them realize that this is an existential necessity, not a luxury, not something that can be put off and delayed, because for every day of delay, it's going to be more difficult, more expensive, and more incomplete. And this is going to be the task, frankly, of the next several centuries to undo the damage we've done.
In 1999, the Chinese government undertook one of the largest regeneration efforts ever to rebuild the Loess Plateau in central China. Considered the cradle of Chinese civilization, this once lush land had been desertified through centuries of agricultural misuse. John Liu, who made this film about the project, was so impressed by its success that he and others have started an organization of eco-restoration camps.
Use what we know works to regenerate life on Earth.
Today, the old-growth forest ecosystems that once covered much of the Earth are being plundered by what I like to call the profit monster. The baton of colonialism and exploitation has been passed from national empires to giant corporations who are given free rein by local governments and international treaties to extract wealth from the land and the people. The world's forests are being cut down for lumber and wood pellets, for palm oil for industrial food, and to make way for gas pipelines, hydroelectric dams, mines for minerals, for batteries, for computers, for electric cars and cell phones. The list goes on and on and on. And, as we all know, the profit monster has created the consumer monster, with an endless appetite for more and more.
A table to escape the crowd.
And all these lands, all these forests, are today and have been for centuries homes to many people.
I got involved in the ecology movement beginning with Chipko, where women of my region said, we're not going to let you cut the forest because these trees protect us. They're our mothers. These forests are sacred. The commitment of indigenous people in spite of centuries of extermination to bring their philosophies and worldviews to the healing of the earth, I think is another very, very important phenomena.
La madre tierra militarizada, cercada, envenenada, donde se violan sistemáticamente derechos elementales, nos exige actuar. Despertemos, despertemos humanidad, ya no hay tiempo. Nuestras conciencias serán sacudidas por el hecho de estar solo contemplando la autodestrucción basada en la depredación capitalista, racista y patriarcal.
Berta Cáceres won the 2015 Goldman Environmental Prize because she organized a coalition of Lenca people of Honduras to stop the corrupt oligarchy and their economic and military partners from building a hydroelectric dam on their sacred river. On March 2, 2016, Berta Cáceres was murdered in her home by a squad led by U.S. military-trained mercenaries and organized by West Point graduate David Castillo, who was president of the company building the dam.
Pero mi madre luchó, organizada.
Her family and the organization she started, Copine, and their lawyers got 7 of the hitmen and David Castillo himself sentenced to long prison terms and are going after the European banks that funded Castillo.
No podemos ser ingenuos ante ese poder represivo que hay ahora en este país.
The more I learned about how the system of life, the biosphere, regulates our climate, and the more I learned about how rapacious capitalism has destroyed the biosphere, causing the climate crisis, the more puzzled I became about why my good friend carbon dioxide gets all the blame for causing the crisis. The focus on CO2 seems to have started with Cervantes Arrhenius.
Cervantes Arrhenius in 1896 did massive calculations to work out, well, if we had a doubling of the greenhouse effect, under the name of CO2. He included water vapor in his calculations. He couldn't separate the two gases. What would be the temperature?
During the second half of the 20th century, Manabe and Weatherald and many other scientists used computers to create sophisticated mathematical models to ask the same question. All these models indicated that doubling CO2 would correlate with an increase of average global temperature of between 2 and 5 degrees Celsius. Manabe and Weatherald knew that water vapor was a dominant greenhouse gas. But they also knew that water in the atmosphere is extremely complex.
So it was basically impossible to model mathematically, right? And they had to say, look, we've got to integrate water vapor into our calculations, but if we assume it is a secondary feedback process to the increase in CO2 and its warming effect, then we can say, look, it's just a secondary factor to the dominant one, which is CO2.
Making water vapor a secondary factor may be necessary in order to construct these highly reductionistic models. The problem is, it doesn't work that way in reality. Models are just that, models. Manabe and Weatherald well understood the danger of confusing the model with the reality. But the models were taken as reality, and they correctly predicted that a global warming crisis was looming. Scientific research dollars poured into the study of carbon dioxide and climate.
But at that stage, there was a small group that said, look, we're never going to sell this politically. It's just too complex and we just lose everybody, right? And we've got to now have a global marketing communications exercise to get the public on this clear, simple line: CO2 increase, global warming, response, reduce emissions.
So the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide became the fall guy, and cutting carbon emissions by cutting fossil fuels became the silver bullet solution that politicians love. In the process, the biosphere, that system that regulates the climate, got almost totally left out of the conversation. The influential Charney report says on page 1, we have not examined the role of the biosphere in the carbon cycle. In 2006, Al Gore's film An Inconvenient Truth took the crisis and the CO2 narrative to the public in a compelling and convincing way.
Now, as I said, they can also measure temperature. Here's what the temperature has been on our Earth.
Here he points out that the graph through the years of the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, in red, and the graph of the average temperature on Earth mirror each other in an astounding way.
And the relationship is actually very complicated, but there is one relationship that is far more powerful than all the others, and it is this: when there is more carbon dioxide, the temperature gets warmer.
It's amazing. Humans, we basically said, yep, CO2 going up, therefore that's a cause. But really, if you think logically, the CO2 increase is a symptom. Okay, so we have a symptom of a disturbed balance between how much our emissions are going up and how much the natural drawdown of green on this planet, which takes CO2 from the air, turns it into sugars through plant photosynthesis, how much that drawdown can operate. Okay, so we've got to be very careful. This is a signal, a symptom.
So the warming is also a symptom.
The warming is also a symptom of this imbalance.
So these two graphs match each other because they both track symptoms of the same problem, the destruction of the biosphere. Yes, fossil fuels are a part of this problem, and the mining and burning of fossil fuels must be reduced. But the climate crisis is not the same as the energy crisis. And no matter how much renewable energy we build, no matter how much carbon emissions are cut, that is not going to solve the climate crisis unless global leaders address the underlying causes of the crisis. Stop destroying and then rebuild the ecosystems that govern the Earth's temperature. Cover the land to reduce the greenhouse effect. Rebuild the soil. keep the water upstream, and learn from people who have been living close to nature for centuries. There's so much we can do. And yet, as I edit this film, the 26th meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework for Combating Climate Change, abbreviated, thankfully, to COP26, remains almost singularly focused on cutting carbon emissions.
There's still no agreement on how countries will limit greenhouse gas emissions.
And the climate crisis is getting worse and worse. Ironically, the push for green energy has only accelerated the extractive economy and the environmental, social, and climate problems that follow. Most alarmingly, the parties are developing complex and confusing schemes to monetize and trade carbon, giving the profit monster a golden opportunity. In the UK, wood pellets are classified as renewable energy, so energy company Drax can cut down trees from boreal forests in Canada, convert them into wood pellets, ship them to England, and burn them in this repurposed coal plant, all the while earning carbon credits which they can sell to other companies so they too can pollute. Talk about crazy. Brazil Biofuels can claim palm oil as a sustainable fuel while at the same time driving deforestation and the destruction of indigenous communities.
So if we make a backtrack, racism, sexism, the destruction of the earth are all born of an agriculture model that required slavery. It is what gave rise to the extermination of the indigenous people and their land grab. And all of that violence. It is what gave rise to the idea that developing land means destroying it. It gave rise to the idea that centralization of control over resources and markets is the model of economic development. And that today has accumulated with the fast forward of that system with fossil fuels. Fossil fuels did not create the wealth in England. Technology did not create the wealth in England. Colonialism did. And they then used coal and the steam engine and the combustion engine to accelerate that colonization. So the alternative to all of this, reversing these destructive 500 years of colonialism and 200 years of the fossil fuel age, means a fossil fuel-free, poison-free agriculture, because that is what is causing the destruction, whether it be climate change or degradation of our food and degradation of the soil and the disappearance of our water, and the sexism and the racism and the civilizing mission of wanting to conquer other cultures and calling that conquest somehow the liberation of the barbarian, that it's in food we can bring justice, equality, and liberation for all.
As I traveled and talked to scientists, activists, and farmers, it became increasingly clear that one big solution to the climate crisis is ecological agriculture. And this made me wonder, how did it come about that the soil in most of the world's big industrial farms is lifeless? I remember loving the smell of a freshly plowed field. Now I know it's the smell of death.
And then came the instrument that has probably destroyed more options for future generations than the sword. It's called the plow.
The irony of plowing came as another big surprise to me. Plowing kills the life in the soil, and dead soil doesn't hold water.
That story goes back 10,000 years. That's what I call the fall. The beginning of agriculture is the equivalent of the biblical fall.
I met Wes Jackson in Kansas to learn about the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, the classic example of a man-made climate disaster. Prairies like these around Wes Jackson's Land Institute once covered the Great Plains in the middle of the United States. These were some of the world's most fertile soils, deep-rooted perennials, millions of buffalo, a rich, diverse ecosystem that maintained the fertility of the living soil through countless droughts. The land supported indigenous people for thousands of years. Then, the U.S. government, in its strategy to colonize the Great Plains with white Europeans, stole and then sold and gave away the Native Americans' land. Then came the plow. In 1837, John Deere developed a metal plow that allowed the so-called sod busters to destroy a thick layer of rich living soil that was centuries old. At first, these fertile lands gave abundant harvest. During World War I, soldiers needed wheat, and this area supplied much of it. Wheat prices soared. It was a profit monster's dream come true. The land was plowed and plowed and plowed. Life in the soil was killed. It eroded and turned to dust. Then the inevitable drought came, and the dust began to blow. On May 11, 1934, the dust from the Great Plains blew all the way to Washington, D.C. It wasn't a coincidence that that was the very day that Hugh Bennett, director of the new Soil Erosion Service, had strategically chosen to testify before Congress about the need for funding to save farming by saving the soil. Just under a year later, the federal government, through the Department of Agriculture, initiated a program for the maintenance of soil. This was part of the first version of what has become known as the Farm Bill in the United States.
Under Roosevelt, a good soil scientist and tremendous esprit de corps.
President Franklin Roosevelt wrote a letter to all the state agriculture departments in which he said, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself."
It's clean and sweet smelling. I reckon, Molly, nobody'd be alive if it wasn't for soil.
Yes, but you need water to live by, too.
Things were looking up for farmers. I was amazed and encouraged to read the 1938 U.S. Department of Agriculture yearbook, Soils and Men. It gives a thorough understanding of soil biology, bacteria, microbial populations, mycorrhizal fungi, cover crops, and the problem with soil erosion. With this knowledge base, the first government subsidies for farmers, given through the Agricultural Adjustment Act, revitalized farming in the Midwest, so that during World War II, when family farms were called upon to feed the Allies, they were ready and able. But after World War II, the military-industrial complex took over farming in the United States. The stage for the chemical industry's takeover of agriculture had been set in the early 1900s with the development of a way to convert nitrogen gas under high pressure into ammonia. This led to nitrogen fertilizers, explosives, and poison gases. Having developed powerful chemicals, including pesticides, during 2 world wars, the major chemical companies, IG Farben, DuPont, Dow, BASF, and others, were ready to market these chemicals to the farmers. And John Deere, having developed its technology for war machinery, introduced bigger and bigger machines.
The right amount of tractor power is the answer to increasing the profit in a large farming operation.
But of course, those increased profits went to John Deere, while the farmers went into debt.
Farmers today are driven by an ag program that you are all funding with your tax dollars to degrade the soil and destroy nutrient density in food so industry can make profit. Plain and simple.
This is Stand Up for Soil, and we are talking about the importance of soil health, its connection to human health and our environment, and what we can do to try to change that, and just to work at communities and give us hope again as farmers.
In Kansas, I was invited to the Jaco Farms Stand Up for Soil picnic. There I found a community of people working to reestablish the connections between good soil, good food, and good health.
But now when you look at the jars here in the front, and then we look at the ones in the back, you can see the difference between infiltration and runoff.
And I kept thinking, how were these connections lost?
And a lot of this really started with the 1970s Farm Bill with Earl Butz and the farm fence row to fence row. You know, we got to feed the world.
In 1973, President Nixon's Secretary of Agriculture, Earl Butz, responded by calling upon American farmers to plant fence row to fence row. And he told them to get big or get out.
Agriculture was put in the hands of big business through the mass production of commodity crops, wheat, soy, corn, chickens, pigs, and cows. Through the Farm Bill, government subsidies now began to feed an industrial food production system designed for corporations to make a profit and build the gross domestic product at the expense of the soil, the animals, good food, public health, and the farmer communities.
We were then told in agriculture that we need to become specialists. We got to get really good at one thing. That diversity wasn't such a good thing. We need to start growing a couple crops and get really good at it. And it just snowballed from there. As we become more streamlined and the diversity went out, the pests increased, weeds, insects. We're now not just using nitrogen and phosphorus and a few chemicals. We're using fungicides, insecticides, seed treatments, sulfur. We're putting down anything you can put down. We're spending money left and right.
The way the system is designed, the farmer can only get the loan from the bank to buy the seed and buy the fertilizer if they use the chemical system.
If they're in the commodity system.
If they're in the commodity system, if they're using the chemical fertilizer, then they can get the loan, then they can pay for their tractor, then they can pay their mortgage. To some degree, they're trapped.
I cannot explain to you folks as consumers who are not farmers the peer pressure that farmers are under. They are wonderful people. They have been caught in a fight that's not about them, and they have been pushed to the limit. They're killing themselves from depression. Kansas is losing 25-year-olds faster than any state in the nation.
Kansas is 90% agriculture ground, and we import 90% of our food.
That's impossible.
You would think, wouldn't you? Yeah. And Iowa's numbers aren't much different.
And that's because it's all commodities.
It's all commodities. But we're growing almost no food here for ourselves.
If you look at where a lot of those commodity crops go, I mean, they go towards ethanol, they go towards animal feed, mostly of animals in confinement operations, and they go towards things like high fructose corn syrup and even batteries and, whatever.
In the U.S. today, government Farm Bill subsidies go to giant corporations. This makes industrial junk food less expensive than real food. But it gets even worse.
I guess at that point, I'd become to question my industry enough that I started looking into it myself. Instead of asking my agronomist or somebody selling the product, I started doing my own research. And I run across a guy named Dr. Don Huber, and he was with Purdue University, and he had done a lot of the research, both for the government and through the university. And he had so much negative information that I just kept thinking this can't be true.
Negative information about?
About glyphosate and what it was doing to the environment, what it was doing to humans, what it was doing to animals. And one night, it was about 11 o'clock, and I'm watching the video, and I finally catch it that glyphosate is an antibiotic.
Monsanto Corporation patented glyphosate as an antibiotic in the soil, so it kills soil microbes.
Roundup kills weeds to the roots.
In addition to that, they thought, well, what if we could just genetically engineer our crops and our seeds so that we could spray as much herbicide as possible, but the plants wouldn't die.
With no harm to nearby plants.
That's how glyphosate got to be the most widely sprayed chemical, in modern history. It's pretty crazy.
And as a farmer who's talking about soil life and soil health, the microbes are everything. And I'm spraying an antibiotic on my soil. And if soil is tied to human health and it's all about the microbiome in the gut or the soil, I almost threw up. I was so devastated. I literally cried. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I called my kids the next morning and apologized to both of them for what I'd done. Wow. And we quit using it that day.
Roundup is better. It goes through the plant to kill it. Tops and rhizomes. Roundup kills it.
Quit trying to kill something all the time and instead say, what can I grow that will take care of this problem for me?
We have now, after we'll say 3 generations of chemical farming, levels of chronic illness in the population that are skyrocketing.
On average, around 1/3 of kids are on a chronic daily medication. And that is shocking to see that change.
I don't think you have a healthcare system in America. You have a $2 trillion disease industry in America, fed by a $1 trillion industrial food system.
There's a big blind spot right now around food, and that blind spot is in assuming that all milk is the same, or all carrots are the same. You can create the volume of carrot, or the volume of beef, or pork, or wheat, but you don't get the sophistication of nutrition. That only comes from a living ecosystem.
Concentrated animal feeding operations, called CAFOs, may make meat in the supermarket cheaper, but the animals aren't healthy, and some would say they are tortured, and the meat is far less nutritious and contains industrial chemicals that we'd all be far better off without. These factory farms produce massive quantities of animal waste and pollution, including methane from the breakdown of all that waste. Methane is a greenhouse gas, and when cows are raised properly, the methane they produce becomes part of the natural carbon cycle. Methane is an important part of all healthy ecosystems. Bacteria produce most of the atmospheric methane when they recycle organic matter, and certain bacteria live on methane. So if you hear a rumor that the methane produced when pasture-raised cows belch or fart is a significant cause of global warming, don't believe it for a moment.
A lot of consumers now understand, or the city people know, that they can blame agriculture for a lot of the water quality issues, the climate issues. I don't know if they totally understand that agriculture is also the answer. Agriculture caused a lot of this. We can fix a lot of it. We can do it really fast.
When you say fast, you mean decades, right?
Easily in decades, yeah.
Right. And by soil quality.
By soil quality.
But the profit monster isn't concerned with soil quality.
1965, India had a drought. India did not have starvation, it did not have a famine, food prices went up. And to regulate the price of grain, our Prime Minister of that time, Lal Bahadur Shastri, asked the United States to send wheat. And the US said, no, we won't give you wheat, you've got to change your agriculture. Take chemicals, take the new seeds. And the Green Revolution was introduced.
The Green Revolution is a bloodless battle. It's the fight against famine and the fight for improved agricultural production.
If you were thinking that the Green Revolution was a good thing, I'm sorry to disappoint you. The Green Revolution is a global strategy by chemical companies and philanthropic organizations to industrialize agriculture through chemical technology and profit by managing the global food supply. Using the altruistic desire to eradicate hunger, they successfully promoted the idea that the world needed new seeds and powerful chemical additives. Biologist Norman Borlaug won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970 for developing and promoting new hybrid strains of wheat in order to feed the world.
The world must decide that either we use agricultural chemicals and use them wisely, the right amounts, the right kinds, to produce the food we need, or we will all starve.
So pollinators are going, the bees are going, the butterflies are going, and it's that larger extermination that is now becoming the wake-up call. Borlaug was given the work of modifying plants to take up chemicals. Problem was that when you apply synthetic fertilizers to plants, there's an instant uptake of nutrients and a disproportionate growth. And so they created the dwarf varieties. And now you could pump the plants with huge amounts of chemicals. They used that one event of a drought and the distress to push the Green Revolution just as much as today a hurricane and a disaster is used to push GMO seeds in the relief. It's an established practice of US aid, the US Embassy. World Bank was part of this. Rockefeller and Ford were part of it. And in '87, as a result of partly exposure to what the biotech industry was planning, the idea that biodiversity, life could be patented, it was intellectual property, it could be a monopoly, I started Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, to save seeds in farmers' hands. And we've created 120 community seed banks because part of Navdanya's work is to reclaim seed as a commons and not allow it to be reduced as intellectual property and private property and monopoly.
Now, I'll just explain how a seed bank works.
Okay.
We don't charge any money from the farmers. It's their seeds. But the catch here is once they are done with their own yield, they have to give the same amount of seed back to the seed bank, adding 2% more on that, or they can give it to the new farmer. So that's how a seed bank keeps on rolling. Right now we have about 713 varieties of rice. The wheat field that you see out there, we have about nearly 222 varieties of wheat. 145 different kinds of vegetables. When you are harvesting seeds, you have to make sure that all the moisture is out. Now we are using clay pots here.
Navdanya's legal team was instrumental in getting a law passed in India that prohibits corporations from patenting seeds.
Our laws don't recognize seed as an invention of these companies. And I'm very grateful that we managed to put in place those laws. Monsanto is still challenging them, but in our patent law we have an Article 3J which says plants, animals and seeds are not human inventions. This clause is becoming so important because Pepsi has sued Indian farmers 10 million rupees each for saving potato varieties.
Accusing them of growing a certain type of potato that it says is exclusively for Lay's chips.
But our law has a clause that farmers' right to save, sow, grow, breed, sell seed can never be taken away.
As now Pepsi says it will drop the lawsuit if the farmers that it's suing join its authorized cultivation program.
The genetic engineering path is not because there's something superior that they're offering. It's a failed technology. But it was successful in establishing patents and monopoly.
Today, Vandana Shiva is taking on Bill Gates, who has become a master of philanthropic imperialism. With the Rockefeller Foundation, he is spearheading AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. According to a report from Tufts University in 2020, AGRA incentives drove land into GMO maize and out of more nutritious traditional crops, eroding food security and nutrition for poor farmers. And Gates is rapidly buying up farmland in the United States. The other day I read that he is funding research into genetically modifying cows.
They leak natural gas, both out the front and the back.
I hope he doesn't think he can make burpless or fartless cows.
Nobody knows how to get rid of
No one knows how to get cows to stop farting.
Exactly, or burping.
I wish this was just another fart joke, but it's not. Bill Gates' steadfast belief that the world's problems can be solved through the control of life stems from the 1960s, when it was popularly assumed that advanced technology would improve on nature and improve people's lives.
Farmers need to produce more food, more sustainably, from the same amount of land. It's ultimately technology that will make the difference.
Today, the technological takeover of farming heralds a new wave of soil destruction and farmer debt.
Even the farmers these days don't touch the soil. They are not anymore farmers. They are just machine minders.
The tractor is able to make its own way to the field.
So I want human and soil relationship to be restored.
As I was researching the first Green Revolution, I discovered this note of hope from Norman Borlaug in 1970.
There's hope that we can produce adequate amounts of food for even this rapidly growing population for the next 20 to 30 years.
Want to hear it again?
There's hope that we can produce adequate amounts of food for even this rapidly growing population for the next 20 to 30 years.
30 years may be a long time for a corporate strategic plan. But, well, what about after the year 2000? Then what? While the population explosion is certainly the elephant in the room, one thing is sure: to feed lots of people, it's better to work with nature than against her. Imagine, Dr. Borlaug, farming methods that can feed the world with nutritious food for, well, forever, and have been doing so.
And the reality on the ground is that smallholders globally, agroecology, is a word they use for it now, but it's basically what indigenous peoples have been doing for a very long time, are producing a massive amount of food, right? Way more calories, much more sophistication, many more crops per acre than the industrial model does.
FAO data is showing that small farms produce more, and it is also showing that 75% of the food we eat comes from small farms.
If we are going to feed the world, we need to start regenerating our soil so that it's there in order to produce food for the next generation.
As I traveled and talked to ecologically minded farmers, I learned that while their farming practices may be different, they all share a handful of basic principles. Work with nature. Cover the land with cover crops or mulch. Some say it's important to keep a living root in the soil. Encourage biodiversity. Keep animals and animal dung on the farm. And most importantly, do no harm. The goal is to eliminate man-made chemical inputs and to develop ways to reduce and hopefully eliminate plowing. Not surprisingly, these basic principles are also a recipe for solving the climate crisis. Think about that.
You go through nature, there's never any exposed soil. So even in farming, where we mess with nature to some degree, hopefully in harmony with her, but you want to keep your ground covered as much as possible.
This soil has been under a regenerative organic type system really for almost 15 years. And what that means is that, it hasn't been tilled. The only way in which we put new seed in the ground is with a no-till drill. And we also use a lot of compost. So we're putting a lot of biomass back into the soil to kind of help feed the livestock in the soil as well as the livestock on the soil. So the whole idea is to build diversity. And the more diversity that you have, the less pesticide that you need because you have that natural biological resistance.
We've not put insecticide on our livestock for 8 or 9 years now, and we don't have fly problems.
So who gets the flies?
Chickens are part of our tools. Now that we're not putting insecticides so the flies aren't sick, the cowbirds show up and eat the flies, which before they wouldn't. Dung beetles, now that we don't put insecticide through the cow so that the dung is infected, and we now have dung beetles that help take care of the larvae. If you give Mother Nature a chance, she'll help you.
Just as grazing animals in the Great Plains helped build the rich, diverse soil that held water, farmers and environmentalists have learned to incorporate grazing animals into their agricultural practices.
So the way the grazing works is tomorrow that fence will be moved ahead 50, 60 feet. They get a fresh piece of grass. They intensely graze it down. That's why it's called rotational grazing. The cows will rotate through a pasture, then the pasture will rest, and they'll only come back when it's completely regrown to a certain height, and then they'll do it again. I sometimes say in our modern agriculture, it's probably one of its biggest crimes has been to take the animals out of the landscape. It's caused so many bad side effects. The animal health has gone down, the soil health has gone down. For me, this is like the ultimate anti-stress view. This is absolutely a balancing, relaxing kind of thing to see that.
A lot of the work that we do is helping farmers and consumers and policymakers embrace that change in thinking. I mean, if you look at this, any almond grower would say, wow, they're doing a great job. And yes, it is a very well-managed orchard, but when you look at this from a regenerative lens, this is kind of a mess because we have the scorched earth appearance here. There's no biology being added back into this soil. It's been sterilized by and large in order to make a nice clean floor for harvest. So yeah, it is beautiful, but we need to change our lens on what we perceive to be as beautiful.
Today, there are many farmers who have changed their lens.
There's a real reframing that needs to happen to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of kinship, of agency and dignity in relationship to land.
You have to radicalize the whole system to change it, it seems.
There's a growing ecological agriculture movement all over the world that supplies fresh, healthy food to millions of people.
We're here on Mohican land, and we partner with this land to grow an abundance of food and medicine for our community. And we do this by reclaiming our Afro-Indigenous farming practices that actually regenerate the soil, that call biodiversity back to these lands.
In many ways, today's small farm movement in the U.S. can be traced back to Booker T. Whatley. He developed an economic model that emphasized that small farms are not little versions of big industrial farms. The small farm's mission is to grow a variety of healthy, tasty, and affordable food for people in its community.
Now this is the vine-ripened tomato, the kind you don't get in the supermarket.
Whatley pioneered the idea of what's now called Community-Supported Agriculture, CSA, in which customers buy a share of a farm's produce directly from the farmer.
Delicious.
Now there are CSAs in many communities.
The regenerative ag farming community is really a very collaborative learning community because there's so much experimentation going on. And everyone's figuring stuff out and then trying to share their understanding.
And here at Soulfire, we are one node in a vast interconnected network. We are part of a growing movement of food and land sovereignty. And we work through a variety of alliances, some that are regional, some that are national, and even international, like Via Campesina is a global alliance of farmers. This is the long haul work. Our North Star is like 7 generations into the future and what we want to leave for our children's children's children.
In my quest, I discovered a few agricultural solution sets to the climate crisis that totally opened my mind. This poster is on the wall of the lab at Wes Jackson's Land Institute in Kansas. The plant on the right is a perennial. Unlike annuals on the left, perennials have deep roots and don't need to be replanted every year.
So I took my students on a field trip to the Kanza Prairie. And while I was there, I was thinking, no soil erosion beyond natural replacement levels, no chemical contamination of the land and water in this prairie. Never been plowed prairie. What's the difference between the cornfield, the wheat field, the soybean field, and so on? What's the difference between that and that prairie? Well, agriculture features, especially grain agriculture, features annuals grown in monocultures. That prairie featured perennials grown in polycultures. And I thought, why do we not have herbaceous perennial seed-producing polycultures? That's what set me off. Why do we not develop perennial grains?
The Land Institute's crops, like these nurseries of kernza and intermediate wheatgrass, are successfully being developed to advance perennial polyculture agriculture. Another amazing solution set is zero-budget natural farming that I learned about from Vijay Kumar. It constitutes a government-supported regenerative agriculture movement that started in response to the devastation of the Green Revolution.
And zero budget actually refers to the principle of this natural farming, that there should be crop diversity, crops of short duration, intermediate duration, long duration. And the income from the short duration crops should ensure that the main crop is grown without any out-of-pocket cost for the farmer. These inputs required for agriculture are made by the farmers on the farm, and very little needs to be purchased from outside. And so we are ensuring livelihood security for the farmer, but more important, we are revitalizing the soil, and we are ensuring that the heat is not radiated.
The underpinnings of the entire ZBNF program are the women's self-help groups.
Because this is a tremendous leap of faith, because for the last 50 years, 60 years, they have been told that if you don't use chemical fertilizers, if you don't use pesticides, you'll not get your crop. And here we are saying you don't need all that. It's a total radical shift.
My wife Sheila and I were invited to the home of the family whose ZBNF fields we had visited that day. They told us how bad the Green Revolution chemicals were.
Spraying chemicals and using fertilizers, his hands have some type of wounds, and joint pains, knee pains, breathing problem.
వీళ్ళు కూడా బాగా చేసేవాళ్ళు మాకు ముందు చెప్పండి వీళ్ళు ముందు ఇట్లే చేయండి నేను చెప్తా ఉంటారు చెప్పిన పద్ధతిలోనే పండించుకొని చెప్తా ఉంటారు మాకు
They are also teaching to their children to do this. If they do farming, do JETPEN.
They are happy that their children can join them on the farms and don't have to migrate to the city and get menial jobs.
Bye-bye.
Which brings me around to the Garden of Happiness, another profound solution set. It's in the Bronx of New York.
If you weren't happy when you came in, by the time you leave, you're going to be happy. That's the Garden of Happiness. There was a man in the empty lot one day. I was in the kitchen and I saw a man with a shovel and a pick. His name was Jose Lugo. And I went out to him. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I want to start a garden." And I said, "Can I help?" And just at that time, we were thinking about a garden. The New York Botanical Garden was just starting a Bronx Greener program of turning the empty lots into community gardens. And so this was their first one.
Talk about eco-restoration.
As those low-income neighborhoods found their power to change something that was ugly, despair, into something that was beautiful, all of a sudden people started to look at the community differently. It's like, oh, no longer an empty lot. Oh, how beautiful. There's trees, there's flowers, there are people laughing, they're barbecuing, they're having a good time. Oh, all of a sudden it opened the eyes of developers.
Oh, they're taking the fireplace, the center of the garden, the heart of the garden.
And so Giuliani, in 1998, decided in the middle of the night that he was going to bulldoze 10 community gardens. I think that was a turning point in the urban ag movement here in New York City, because people found their power in terms of organizing and coming together and protesting, marching on the steps of City Hall. It was fantastic. These gardens are part of the framework of the city. So why not put a rooftop garden? Why not put a garden in the backyard? I was a physical therapist too. I started to see the effects of the junk food, the processed food, the fast food that we're having on my patients who had farming background. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, a stroke, end-stage renal disease, all these diet-related diseases. But then when I started talking about the food, I said, but yes, I grow the best collard greens and tomatoes and eggplants. All of a sudden that started to come back. And then they realized how important eating off the land was and how they've lost that, how they lost that connection. And by losing that connection, they're now sick. For the farmers market, we have our chickens, they're inside now. Since we grow it, why not offer that to the people in our community and let them know that there are gardens that are growing food and that it's fresh and it's local and it's culturally appropriate. I mean, that's what makes community gardens so beautiful. And that's why, if you think about, it's not a garden, it's a community garden. And that word community garden is very, very important. So I coined the term food apartheid because my lens on how I was looking at the food system was based on race, demographics, and income inequality. And if you look at that, and if you start talking about that in that conversation, you get at the root of the problem. Where we all know, it's not rocket science, is that the subsidized, cheap food goes into low-income neighborhoods, both urban and rural, and the healthy, fresh, designer, organic food is mostly in white, wealthy neighborhoods. And then the bigger question that needs to be asked, the biggest question that needs to be asked in this food system is, we live in the greatest country in the world where we grow enough food and we waste enough food, but we have hunger and poverty. Why? Because people profit from people who are poor and people who are sick. And so, if you look at the food system controlled by a group of white men with power over, so what I say to them is that you got three things. You got to either give up that power, hard to do, share it, easy thing to do, or the last thing, I'm going to take it. And that's going to be the food revolution. To grow your own food gives you power. Gives you power. Owning land, power. And so now young people want to farm and want to own land and want to control their food system, want to control what they eat and what they put in their body, because now they know the truth. Yep, he got to get his cabbage, because if he doesn't get it, squirrels will get it.
I often think about this image. It reminds me that civilizations and species come and go. Life on Earth will prosper long after we are gone.
The planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. A surface nuisance.
Through the making of this film, I have learned that the climate of Earth is governed largely by the flow of water through living ecosystems. But in a relentless quest for wealth and dominion, humans have destroyed these ecosystems and left behind dry land. I have also learned that life is a regenerative process. All the courageous people I talked with along the way are solving the climate crisis by working with nature to restore ecosystems that balance the cycle of life. They are growing and eating healthy food from healthy soil. People can join this effort in many ways. But the climate problem is severe and has reached the point where large-scale efforts are necessary. As I sat at the base of my favorite oak tree, I began to dream of what could be. What if Western economists finally realized that a living tree is more valuable than a dead one? And people began to not only save the forest ecosystems, but to rebuild forests from the edges outward. And what if all the profit monsters flew to outer space and stayed there? And in this vision, the US government has stopped subsidizing giant corporations and is instead using its farm bill to subsidize small ecological farms and farmers' markets, and to help large farms shift to regenerative methods. And every school kid knows that the more we humans nurture and protect the land, the more the land will nurture and protect us. That's the key to regenerating life.